My video today is, do alternate timelines exist? Mm. I could say I'm not very sure. Do alternate timelines exist? I mean, they could exist, but I mean, what type of alternate timelines what could be out there? Could it be an alternate timeline where 9/11 didn't happen? And if so, then how is the world of those people living where ultimate timeline where 9/11 didn't happen? We never went into Afghanistan and probably never went into Iraq, but we probably would have still went into Iraq if 9/11 would have had never happened. We would have definitely been more into surveillance China and countries like that. Would have been focused more on the Asian countries if 9/11 would have never happened, but Iraq more likely would have had happened. But let's say, for example, like the Soviets. What if the Soviets would have won the Cold War? Could have conquered the United States? How would the world would have been if the Soviets would have had won the Cold War and they would have conquered America? Would we all be on the communists? Would we all would have been brutally murdered at Americans? Would the Soviets would have been brutal towards us if they would have won the Cold War? Or what about like we hear about the Confederates? How would the world would have been? The Confederates would have won the world, won the Second Civil War. Would they would have lost to where they had gotten to a war with Britain or Germany or Mexico? Could have lost another war if they would have succeeded defeating the United States on that timeline? What about like the Nazis? I mean, come on off this about the Nazis, right? We know they was powerful, but they wasn't powerful enough to kick the Russians or the British ass. I mean, England and Russia could have kicked the Nazi Germans ass without the U.S. involved in it, but the U.S. just gave them the push. That helped to really defeat those son of a bitches. Let's say if the Nazis would have got over here to America, who would they would have annihilated? They would have killed Jews, would have killed Polish, they would have killed Irish people, would have killed Mormons, probably would have killed Jehovah's Witnesses. They probably would have killed hillbillies. They would have went down to the south, hooked up with those cracker boys down there, and probably would have put us as blacks in slavery for economic purposes. But they probably wouldn't have exterminated us, but the Nazis probably would have been allies with Mexico. They probably wouldn't have killed the Native Americans because they were fascinated with a lot of Native American ancient storytelling. They probably wouldn't have killed them, but America would have had German privileges. But with it, the Civil Rights Movement, with it, the whites in the South would have had won the Civil Rights Movement, and Jim Crow and segregation would never fail. How would the world would have been under Jim Crow, like segregation, like America? I mean, how would this country be if the Jim Crow would have had never failed in the ultimate timeline? Would we still have white only signs in the Deep South? Could have expanded up to the North? Could have expanded to other countries? Because we know South Africa apartheid. They whole apartheid was built out of the Jim Crow South of America. The guy who founded the apartheid back in 1948 in South Africa, he was inspired by some of the Jim Crow laws in America. So as Nazi Germany, we know the Nuremberg law, what the Nazis had pushed against the Jews in Germany. They had got some of that from some of the segregation, some of their racial policies over there in Nazi Germany. They got it from the segregation. But with it, the Nazis would have had won. I mean, we could have been living in a dangerous world. It's a good thing they didn't win. But ultimate timelines could actually exist. But what fit like in the ultimate timeline, Saddam Hussein would have won the first Gulf War, or he would have won the second invasion against the U.S. I mean, how powerful he would have been. What if the state of Israel would have never existed? Would we ever have a Steve Davis-like Middle East, or would the Muslims would have had lived peace over there without the state of Israel? Or what if the state of Israel would have conquered all the Middle East? How would the whole Middle East would have looked under a Jewish Middle East if they would have had won in the ultimate timeline? Or what if China would have never had became a global superpower? I mean, how would that would still be? What if Japan would have won the Second World War and they would have defeated the U.S. and the British in Asia? Japan, Korea, and all the other Asian countries would have been under imperialist rule. But the Japanese didn't have no military getting over to America. I mean, because they didn't have a military industrial capability like the U.S. But the U.S. knew it was impossible for them to actually win the war against them when they battled them in World War II in the Pacific. But ultimate timelines have been always something that always been interesting me. I always wonder. What if the Jim Crow in the Deep South would have never had failed I mean, what would have been a situation towards blacks in the South? I mean, well, how would apartheid would have looked at if Massimo Mandela would have never been released from prison, if he would have died in prison, and the white regime would have still remained in power in 2000? I always wonder how would America would have been if we would have never gotten a 9/11 attack. I mean, how would the world would have been, like how would America would have been, let's say if we would have, like on the ultimate timeline where in America we have no rapists, no serial killers, where all these women who've been raped and serial killer had never had encountered none of these rapists and serial killer. I mean, how would America would have been without rapists and serial killers? Or maybe there's an ultimate timeline where mass shootings don't happen in the U.S. Maybe there's an ultimate timeline where the police ain't militarized, what we see here in this timeline. Because we know after 9/11, they really became militarized, and a lot of them had worked directly with the CIA. And we saw how they got Homeland Security money. They bought tanks, they bought military armor B for their police stations across America, these local police department. I mean, what is like in the ultimate timeline where the police ain't militarized? In the ultimate timeline, we don't have mass shootings in America. In the ultimate timeline, like we don't have serial killers like the Ted Bundys and all those other rapists and serial killers who went out there and killed all these women. I mean, how would America would be in the ultimate timeline without rapists and serial killers? I mean, women would probably be more safer than ever if we didn't have no rapists and serial killers in the U.S. like that. How would America be like an ultimate timeline where we have no fucking Confederate statues of guys who went to war against America, and then these assholes get fucking statues honored for them? I mean, maybe in an ultimate timeline where racists don't exist in the U.S. How would that be? Where in the ultimate timeline we have no racists. That would be a good thing for blacks and other people who ain't white. I mean, live in America where no racism, no persecution of blacks and Indians and Hispanics by these racist fucking white boys in this country. I mean, that would be really something in the ultimate timeline too. Maybe there is an ultimate timeline where racists don't exist in America. Man, I mean, like, what feel like an ultimate timeline where Mexico actually won the Spanish-American War against the U.S. in the 1840s, and the Southwest was still under Mexico. We probably wouldn't have all this illegal problem what we got today, because they would have had their territory what the U.S. stole from them back in the 1840s. I mean, how would the world would have been if the Europeans would have never came over to the New World and conquered, like Columbus and all these other fucking Europeans who came over here and they stole all these indigenous people, like in the North America, went to Australia, New Zealand, Greenland, and all over the world, and they robbed all these indigenous people of their land. How would the world would have been without a European colonization? We probably would still be in the Dark Ages, maybe in the ultimate timeline that do exist, where the Europeans never went around the world and colonized none of these non-white countries, and the world probably still be in the Dark Ages, which we don't have all this advanced technology. I mean, maybe in the ultimate timeline where white supremacy had never either existed, never been thought of. Maybe in the ultimate timeline, the Nazis never rise to power, or the Soviets never rise to power. Or maybe in the ultimate timeline, they could be out there where the Confederates had never declared the war against the U.S. and America never had a civil war, but slavery could have been abolished peacefully without these Confederate people starting the war in the South. I mean, but there could be ultimate timeline where things could be so different. Maybe an ultimate timeline where the British did win the American Revolution and George Washington did lose and he was captured by the British and executed. I mean, how would the world would have been? I mean, I do believe ultimate timeline they could possibly exist out there in the universe, but there's really no proof because nobody from my world had never went there, and nobody from their world had never came here. And it's really like a myth, but it could actually exist where these ultimate timelines do exist, where history took place different, and where the United States could be more of a different country, could be more of a more peaceful country than a more of a violent country. Like in this timeline, we live in this timeline where we got this war on terror been going on since our childhood life, the militarization of the police. We still got white supremacists, mass shootings. We got corruption in politicians. We got gang members in here. We got illegal immigrants. We got We got U.S. soldiers coming back from wars and stuff, and their government just abandoned them. I mean, this timeline fucked up. Maybe in another timeline, the U.S. ain't in no war on terror, and the U.S. is more peaceful. And maybe we don't have these mass shootings, like I said, in these timelines, no militarization of police. Maybe we don't have street gang members in these other timelines in America. But you always really wonder how would the world would have been. You really wonder, like, if the Soviets would have had, let's say, won the Cold War, what type of world we could have been living in, or what type of world we'd have been living in if the Germans would have won, or with the Jim Crow segregation never fell in the Deep South, or apartheid South Africa had never failed, or with it, for example, if Mussolini would have never died in Europe, his people would never turned against him, or with it, the royal family in Britain still run the country, and that England don't have prime minister, but Queen Elizabeth and them still control full government in Britain. I mean, how would the world would have been? I mean, ultimate timeline is always good to guess, but we have no proof do these ultimate timeline exist. And if they do exist, maybe the people in those timelines probably wonder, are there ultimate timelines beyond them? And they probably don't have no proof. Do other timelines exist besides them? Ultimate timeline, they could be wondering just like I'm wondering. But ultimate timeline had always been an interesting topic to me since I was younger. I always visioned ultimate timeline with it the other individual would have won, or with it things would have went different from the reality we live in. But in this reality I live in, I mean, it's a lot of anxiety. I had a bad life. Maybe in another timeline, of a virgin came up in a better life, didn't see a lot of abuse when I was growing up, didn't have the type of social, psychological problems what I have. Maybe in that timeline, that me in another timeline came up in a better life, came up in a loving life, a perfect life, didn't suffer all the trauma what I went through in this lifetime. But I guess that's the way how it is.